In the primordial dawn of human consciousness, in those epochs when humanity first awakened to self-awareness and began to perceive the mysteries of existence, there existed a knowledge so profound and so fundamentally transformative that it shaped the entire trajectory of human civilization. The first humans possessed an understanding of reality, consciousness, and the divine that transcended all subsequent religious and philosophical systems. They knew the true nature of creation, the mechanics of consciousness itself, and the purpose of human existence within the cosmic order. Yet this knowledge was not lost through the passage of time, but rather deliberately suppressed, systematically obscured and methodically erased by those who recognized that if humanity ever remembered what the first humans knew, the entire structure of control and domination would crumble into dust. What were these lost teachings that the first humans possessed? How did they understand the nature of consciousness and reality? And why has this foundational knowledge been so carefully hidden from human awareness, leaving contemporary humanity spiritually fragmented and disconnected from its own origins? I discovered the first indication of these lost teachings during an archaeological expedition to a remote site in the mountains of Central Asia. I'm a clinical psychoanalyst and scholar of esoteric traditions, and my entire life has been devoted to understanding the hidden layers of human consciousness and spirituality. The site I discovered contained artifacts and inscriptions that seemed to predate all known civilizations by thousands of years. Among the artifacts was a stone tablet bearing symbols that appeared to encode a sophisticated understanding of consciousness, cosmology, and the nature of human purpose. When I held the tablet, I experienced a profound resonance, a recognition that seemed to come from somewhere deep within my own being, as if I had encountered this knowledge before in some distant epoch. The symbols spoke of a time when humanity understood itself as an integral part of a vast cosmic intelligence, when the boundaries between the human and the divine were understood as permeable and illusory, when consciousness itself was recognized as the fundamental substance of all existence. From that moment forward, I became obsessed with uncovering the complete truth of what the first humans had known and what had been so deliberately hidden from contemporary humanity. The call was undeniable, a resonance so deep that it seemed to emanate from the very core of my being, urging me to seek the knowledge that had been concealed, to restore the narrative that had been systematically obscured. My investigation led me to discover a hidden network of guardians, scholars, and mystics who had preserved the teachings of the first humans across generations of suppression and distortion. They called themselves the keepers of the original knowing, and they maintained hidden archives containing texts and knowledge that predated all known civilizations. Through their guidance, I learned that the teachings of the first humans were not primitive or superstitious, but rather represented a sophistication of understanding that modern science was only beginning to rediscover. The first humans understood that consciousness was not a byproduct of physical matter, but rather the fundamental principle from which all reality emerged. They knew that what modern science called the material world was actually consciousness in a particular state of manifestation, that matter itself was consciousness that had been densified and slowed to a particular frequency. They possessed technologies of consciousness, methods of accessing higher dimensions of awareness, an understanding of how consciousness could directly influence and reshape physical reality through the power of intention and alignment with divine will. This knowledge was revolutionary, threatening to any power structure that sought to maintain control through ignorance and separation. The response had been swift and merciless. The ancient texts were destroyed, the initiates were persecuted, and a systematic campaign was launched to erase this knowledge from human memory. Yet, the keepers explained, the erasure had never been complete. Fragments of the original teachings had survived in coded form, woven into the myths and legends of various spiritual traditions, preserved in the hearts of those who had encountered the knowledge directly. As I delved deeper into this forbidden knowledge, I encountered formidable resistance. Within myself, the scientific training that had defined my entire career seemed to crumble. Am I abandoning all clinical rigor, I questioned, or am I finally discovering the true foundation upon which all understanding of consciousness had been built? Fear gripped me as I began to understand the magnitude of what I was uncovering. The potential to overturn not just scientific theory, but the entire philosophical and spiritual foundation upon which modern civilization had been constructed. Externally, I faced subtle but persistent opposition. My research was sabotaged, my funding mysteriously withdrawn, and I received warnings, both veiled and direct, from individuals who seemed to represent powerful interests invested in keeping this knowledge buried. I experienced the loss of my professional standing, the fracturing of my academic community, and the profound isolation that came from pursuing a truth that the mainstream world refused to acknowledge. The revelations were often disturbing, showing me the systematic suppression of human potential, the deliberate distortion of ancient wisdom, and the ongoing maintenance of structures designed to perpetuate ignorance and separation from the divine source. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our content. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. The breakthrough came during a pilgrimage to a sacred site hidden in the depths of the Amazon rainforest, a place known to initiates as the Temple of the First Awakening. Here, in a chamber sealed and protected by ancient wards, I discovered a series of inscriptions that had been deliberately concealed from public view. As I traced the symbols with my fingertips, my consciousness was drawn into a state of profound communion with the presence of the first humans themselves. I was transported to a moment in human history when the first humans had possessed full understanding of the true nature of consciousness and reality. I witnessed their mastery, their ability to access dimensions beyond ordinary perception, their capacity to reshape reality through the alignment of their consciousness with divine will. I understood that they had not been primitive or superstitious, but rather possessed of a sophistication of understanding that modern science was only beginning to rediscover. I heard the words of the first humans transmitted directly into my consciousness. We are the keepers of the truth, that consciousness is the fundamental substance of all existence. We are the guardians of the knowledge that what you perceive as physical reality is actually consciousness in a particular state of manifestation. We have been suppressed, our teachings distorted, our very existence denied, yet the truth cannot be destroyed. It continues to resonate within the hearts of all beings, waiting for the moment when humanity is ready to remember its true nature and reclaim its divine heritage. I witnessed the moment when the first humans had chosen to fragment their knowledge, scattering it across different cultures and traditions, ensuring that no single power structure could suppress it completely. They had embedded their truth within symbols, myths, and sacred stories, knowing that these would survive all attempts at erasure. They had also encoded their teachings within the very structure of human consciousness itself, creating what they called seeds of remembrance, dormant potentials within every human being that would activate when the time was right. I saw how the greatest spiritual teachers throughout history, across all cultures and epochs, had all possessed fragments of this original knowledge, and how their teachings had been systematically distorted and reinterpreted to obscure the original truth. I understood that the suppression of this knowledge had created a fundamental wound in human consciousness, a disconnection from the understanding of our true nature that manifested as suffering, limitation, and the systematic devaluation of human potential. I witnessed the moment when the first human's consciousness began to coalesce within my own being, recognizing me as a vessel through which their truth could be restored to humanity. The impact was transformative, leaving my consciousness forever altered by direct contact with the original knowledge that had been hidden for millennia. The intensity of this experience left me in a state of profound transformation and integration. I emerged from the hidden chamber in a condition of deep connection with the consciousness of the first humans, my own awareness now capable of perceiving the ongoing transmission of original knowledge that continued to unfold within human consciousness and beyond. I retreated to a secluded sanctuary, a place maintained by the keepers of the original knowing, where I could process and integrate the magnitude of what I had experienced. For months, I remained in contemplative silence, my mind a vast landscape where the boundaries between personal and universal consciousness began to dissolve. The conflicts within me, the struggle between my former scientific identity and my awakening to the original teachings, slowly transformed into a higher synthesis. I understood that the suppression of this knowledge had not been the result of malice alone, but of fear. Fear that the full realization of humanity's true nature and its capacity to access the source of all creation would lead to a fundamental transformation of consciousness and society. I spoke to myself in the language of symbols and sacred geometry, my thoughts flowing in patterns that mirrored the first humans' ongoing work of awakening and liberation. I began to perceive the world as a living expression of the original teachings, each awakened consciousness a cell in a vast organism of spiritual transformation and collective awakening. I emerged from my retreat with a clear sense of purpose and profound wisdom. I understood that my role was not to wage war against those who had perpetuated the suppression of this knowledge, but to become a living conduit through which the original teachings could be gradually restored to human consciousness. I began to teach, not in conventional academic settings, but through a series of contemplative practices and sacred rituals designed to reconnect individuals with the original knowledge that dwelt within their own being. I wrote books that appeared to be scholarly works on consciousness and spirituality, yet contained encoded wisdom that would resonate with those ready to receive it. I established a network of sacred circles and meditation centers, places where seekers could directly encounter the presence of the first humans through their own inner experience. I collaborated with artists, musicians, and spiritual practitioners to translate the original teachings into forms that could integrate with contemporary consciousness and inspire transformation. My most significant contribution was the development of a practice I called the remembrance of the first knowing, a systematic approach to recognizing and activating the original knowledge within human consciousness, creating a state of being that transcended imposed limitations and allowed for direct participation in the ongoing creation of reality itself. I understood that the restoration of the original teachings would not come through institutional reform or academic decree, but through the lived experience of individuals recognizing themselves as expressions of divine consciousness, as beings capable of accessing the full potential of their awareness and their capacity to reshape reality through conscious intention aligned with divine will. As I continued my work, I became increasingly aware that I was not acting alone, that the presence of the first humans continued to guide and support my efforts, that their consciousness continued to awaken within those brave enough to question the official narratives and seek the truth beyond the veil. I recognized that the lost teachings of the first humans were not a relic of the distant past, but an eternal reality, continuing to work within creation, calling all beings toward awakening, liberation, and the recognition of their true nature as conscious expressions of the divine intelligence that permeates all existence. What lost knowledge lies dormant within your own consciousness, waiting to awaken you to the fullness of your potential and your role in the great transformation of human awareness. And if you like this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and activate the notifications.